childhood home of the first U.S.-born Pope, Robert Francis Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV.
Wow.
Amid pushback from Dalton residents who complained about the dilapidated state of local roads and the village's high debt, House said the purchase would eventually pay for itself, calling it a historical opportunity. The Catholic Church in Vietnam welcomed with great joy and hope the ordination of 40 new priests during the month of June, the Sacred Heart of Jesus. House Republicans are ready to vote on President Donald Trump's $4.5 trillion tax breaks and spending cuts early Thursday, up all night as GOP leaders and the president himself work to persuade skeptical holdouts to drop their opposition by his 4th of July deadline. Final debates began in the pre-dawn hours after another chaotic day and night at the Capitol, following a series of closed-door meetings. The outcome would be a milestone for the president and his party. And the jury in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial convicted him of prostitution-related crime, but cleared him of sex trafficking and racketeering charges. The three-time Grammy Award winner was convicted of flying people around the country, including his girlfriend, and paid male sex workers to engage in, sexual acts. So, I know, it's don't get me started.
Okay.
I have a whole new theory on that.
Okay.
Microsoft says it is laying off about 9,000 workers. Its second mass layoff in months and its largest in more than 2 years. The tech giant began sending out layoff notices yesterday that hit the company's Xbox video game business and other divisions. And finally, in sports news, Clayton Kershaw of the Los Angeles Dodgers earned his 3,000th career strikeout yesterday as the Dodgers beat the White Sox 5-4. And the WNBA, as you said, Tom, is expanding, correct?
Where?
That's I don't know. I mean,
you didn't even bother to read past that on the headline.
No, I mean, I'm shocked I even knew that. I accidentally found out they were expanding. I didn't seek out
accidentally.
This
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
So it's. I'm going to stop before I get myself in trouble.
You're bringing in our
so
guest?
our first guest today is Shawn McAfee, who is here to talk with us about his children's book, St. Dominic and the Rosary, part of the Saints and Sacramentals series from Tan Books. Good morning, Shawn. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, great.
Great to have you. I've just been paging through your book, and it's boy, what a need this fulfills, and what a great thing to do for young people to learn about the Rosary. What inspired you to pursue this particular idea?
Yeah, and old people, I will say. And thank you for the compliments on the book. I can't believe I was finally given the opportunity, or had the confidence to muster to do a children's series. I'm first of all, I'm in love with St. Dominic. I always have been since I became a Catholic in 2012, and my family prays the Rosary, and I've just always been attracted to so many things, so many kind of philosophical ideas, especially as a parent, about the Rosary. First of all, it's a wonderful teaching device. It's a pretty easy prayer to memorize. Our 8-year-old, who just became 9 yesterday, shouldn't say 8-year-old anymore. He liked to lead the prayer, as soon as he learned how to read. He would read the mysteries and whatnot. So it's a prayer that children can get attached to, but it's also a behavior instrument in our family. It's not easy to sit the littles down. We have kids as young as 2 and 0, 6 weeks old, and it's not easy to get the family to sit down and do it. So I wanted to write a children's book that would kind of encourage parents on the first part to teach their kids how to pray the Rosary. And so I wanted to explore the true origins of how we receive the Rosary from St. Dominic and the Blessed Virgin Mary. And also, towards the back of the book, after the story's concluded, there's the prayers in Latin and English in interlinear style in the form of the Rosary, too. So there's not going to be any wondering for parents for children who want to, follow along as they pray it after church on Sundays, or maybe before bed on some nights, how to do it. So I think we nailed it. The artwork is beautiful, and it tells the true story and teaches parents and children how to sit down and pray the Rosary.
As you were talking, you made me recall when you said you use it as a sort of a
your
child
memories.
Yeah, I remember. So I just to communicate to our listeners what a need this book fulfills. Again, it's called St. Dominic and the Rosary, and it's primarily for children to explain the background and the importance of the Rosary. So when I was a kid, my parents, who were devout Catholics, lifelong Catholics, would pray the Rosary together every evening. And they would never compel us kids to do it with them. It was optional, and that's and so as a kid, I opted to not do it, because they didn't. I mean, as devout as my parents were, they never had the conversation. They never set us down and said, "Here's why we're doing this. Here's what it means. Here's what it's for." It was just so as a small child, to me, it was just this droning on and on, boring kind of exercise that was like a kind of torture. And so I would hide in my room until they were done. But then we'd go on summer vacations in the car and drive cross country, and they would pray the Rosary in the car. And my only recourse there was to pretend like I was asleep so that I wouldn't have to do it. But my point. My point is that I really think as a kid, had there been an instrument like your book, where as a child I could have read it and understood and seen illustrations and been captivated by the story of St. Dominic and Our Lady, that could have drawn me in. And I think that's so important what you're doing here in this book.
Thank you. Yes, my kids have been pleased by it, and of course it's received some phenomenal reviews, but that's really encouraging. And I'm sorry that I'm really actually, there's a wonderful side to what you said about your parents, is that, they didn't just do it for you, though. The opposite side of that sword is that, they didn't really want to pray the Rosary, but they wanted just you to, so they only taught you. But, I think it's actually encouraging that your parents had a true love of their own prayer with each other. And that's something to be admired, that children will remember. My parents prayed the Rosary, even if I wasn't always invited to do it or forced to do it. They loved it, and maybe I should look into that.
I think in your parents' defense, though, Tom, that was back in the generation where we just thought through osmosis of being around Catholicism and faith, our children would pick it up, and eventually they'd understand it. I think right now, and maybe the big point of your book, Shawn, is we have to be intentional in passing on an understanding of our traditions, of why we pray, what is the meaning behind this. And I think that's why we see so many more materials now for children and parents to, teach children to pray, something like this book, which, Shawn, and when I went through it, I thought, the way that you wrote it, the pictures are very gripping, and they draw you into the story. But this really is a story too for parents to understand. Like you're not going to be bored. Like it's not going to be beyond. Oh, this is so juvenile. It's written in a way that parents could maybe embrace and look back at a simple understanding of the faith that maybe they've long forgotten, because we just get buried in cynicism as we age. And this just brings the story to life in a way like that, I think, for parents as well.
Well, thank you for that. Again, extremely encouraging. You should see the smile on my face right now. I totally agree, and that was the intention of writing this. Like, I'm staring at a page where they're explaining the mysteries of the Rosary, the sorrowful mysteries in particular on this page. And I think a lot of us, even adults, and there might have been years, that was my life as a Catholic, where I would kind of see the mysteries as more like, oh, these are just the touch points, but we didn't really... until I wrote this book, honestly, I didn't really connect all of the sorrowful mysteries to like the real reason that it was given to St. Dominic, which was to preach against the Albigensians. And the Albigensians had an issue with the body, with the incarnation. They were against the incarnation. They believed that the flesh was evil. And so the sorrowful mysteries show the very human side of Christ and his redemptive suffering and our participation in that. And so in a very child-friendly way, but also very influential to parents and adults. We explain how the scourging at the pillar, the crown of thorns, Jesus carrying the cross, the crucifixion, how those get after the truth of the incarnation. And yes, we can be sad, but there's also joy to be had as we're praying the sorrowful mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
Shawn, I think another, and I don't know if you thought of this in the writing, but I think another great use for your book, another great audience for your book would be non-Catholics who are suspicious of the Rosary or skeptical, because so often, the Blessed Mother and the Church's devotion to the Blessed Mother is a stumbling block for many Protestants. And the Rosary is something that's often derided as, this mindless, repetitive prayer that's not focused on the Lord, but focused on his mother. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about the Rosary. And I think that your book could be a sort of non-threatening way to explain the point of it and the history of it to someone who might be skeptical.
Yes, yeah, and there's, I'm not sure how much time we have, but there's two really important points to stem off of whenever you say that, is going back to my comment just now about defeating the Albigensians. We really, that's why I led off this interview with telling the true story of St. Dominic and the Rosary, because I have read so many Rosary origin stories that says, oh yes, it was just uneducated people in the field who were, given a rope with knots on it, and they were told, how to pray Our Lady's Psalter, and that was the way that they could participate in some of the prayers of the Church. And it's like, no, these are actual teaching points about errors that existed at the time, and the more that we reflect on Our Lady's Mary's interactions with Christ and what she would have seen, and then of course the life of Christ, and we kind of put those two together, we have the ability to really correct some hardcore errors that were literally destroying communities and cities back then in southern France and northern Spain and Western Italy. And so that's really where I think that we must resurrect and bring back this tradition of St. Dominic receiving this from Our Lady in order to battle errors, because we have several of these errors rearing their ugly head in our time. And like you said, our separated brothers and sisters, they're looking at it with skepticism, thinking that we're droning on, but also the influence and articulate the real emphasis of these biblical stories, as we correct those errors with them.
There's a real sense of joyfulness in the book, just even from the images and the illustrations and the bright, vivid colors. And I love the depiction of the sisters in the illustrations, and as well as your text. I mean, it's really something that I think visually will grab young people. And it's a lot of our Catholic children's books that we've run across they might dumb things down a little bit, and your book does not do that. I mean, it's accessible, but it's also content rich. And who do you envision, like what age level do you envision is like the sort of the best target for your book?
Right. So I have a 4-year-old, and I read the book to him as soon as I got my copy. I was telling him for months, hey, I wrote this book, because his name is Dominic, and I also have a son named Jordan who is a successor to St. Dominic. So, we pray the Rosary, and I was like, hey, I wrote this book. It's kind of named after you. And they read it. My 4-year-old read it with me. I, of course, read it to him, and he actually behaved a bit different afterwards, and I love that. I've also got a girl who is turning 7, and she read it with me, and she said, that was a lovely story, Dad. That was in her own sweet way. It wasn't like she had to say that, because we were also reading a couple other little, Catholic children's books before bedtime. And then my 9-year-old, the one who I said was 8, still getting used to his new age, my 9-year-old really enjoyed it as well. And so I think that's probably like I tried to go for a 5+, but I reading it to my 4-year-old who, he's wild. He is just so funny, Jordan. I would say it can go as low as 4, maybe even 3. Just helping kids understand, the organization of the Rosary, the story, because kids really love characters. This is why they just want to watch TV all day. It's not because it's mindless. Yes, it's mindless, but they want to watch characters, and I think that this book does a really good job of creating characters and creating a visual space for them to say, this isn't just a chain of beads. We don't just kind of do this and have to behave and told to sit down. And, this is something that actually happened, and it connects that dots for them. So, or those dots for them. So I think that correct age group, that's my long-winded way of saying them, somewhere around 4 to maybe 9.
So this is St. Dominic and the Rosary, new children's book by Shawn McAfee. Shawn, how can people find your book if they want to purchase it?
Right, and so it is actually available in 3 formats. It's available in Kindle, audiobook, and in hardcover. You can get it at your favorite online retailer like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but go to tanbooks.com and you'll probably find a discount there.
Shawn McAfee, thanks for joining us so much, and thanks for the book.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Andrea Picotti-Bayer is joining the show. We're going to talk about some of these Supreme Court cases that came out. Stay with us.
Coles Murphy Glover and Associates is a full-service engineering firm offering services for industrial and commercial clients. From churches, schools, and shopping centers to shipyards, material handling facilities, liquid bulk terminals, and complete plant design, the engineers at CMG are prepared to make your next engineering project a success. Offices in Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee, Coles Murphy Glover and Associates can be reached at 251-433-1611 or at cmg-a.com.
Good morning, and God bless you. Today is Thursday in the 13th week of Ordinary Time, July 3rd.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger into the nail marks, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now a week later his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it into my side. And do not be unbelieving, but believe." Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." The Gospel of the Lord.
And now, on behalf of Archangel Radio, go out and proclaim the great news of Jesus Christ.
This is a Family Media Minute. I'm Tom McDonald. The children's book, The Weight of a Mass, A Tale of Faith, was released in 2002 by Josephine Nobisso and illustrated by Catalin Sesgetti. It's a beautifully illustrated parable that highlights the profound value of the Catholic Mass. A poor widow begs a baker for a scrap of bread, offering to attend Mass in his name. Amused, the baker scales a slip of paper marked "One Mass" against his pastries, but nothing outweighs it. Even his grand wedding cakes remain lighter. Struck by this miracle, the baker and his town realize the Mass's incomparable worth. Rich watercolors and gold foil art enhance this profound yet simple message that nothing on earth compares in value to just one Mass. The book is perfect for conveying to children the importance of the Mass while maintaining its sacred mystery. This has been a Family Media Minute. I'm Tom McDonald.
When we have faith in Christ, we spiritually get inoculated against the curse of sin.
Become spiritually inoculated by listening to Archangel Radio.
Parents need to be a witness to prayer, and I think fidelity to prayer is more important than anything.
we've become so comfortable as being Christian and being faithful that we don't recognize what a gift it is to the world to live that. And all those small moments we let pass by just because we think they're unimportant, but those build upon each other, and they make this Christian world that we live and interact in. The small things we do in life really, really matter in ways maybe more significant than we could ever see.
Archangel Radio, 1410 AM and 94.5 FM.
There are layers to the soul. So the more we get into a spirit of surrendering, we get sensitive to the things that can be offered to God. These interior mortifications of sacrifice. Many things where a mortification in silence can be offered to God and offered for souls.
Learn how to give yourself up for God by listening to Archangel Radio.
Welcome back to LA Catholic Morning on this Friday. Tom McDonald. I'm Ellen Taylor. On the line with us, regular guest Andrea Picotti-Bayer, and she writes about all things legal for ncregister.com. And we always appreciate you coming on, Andrea, and explaining when things happen, especially post-Supreme Court taking a break for the summer. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, always good. So, it seemed like we had a lot of cases that came out last Friday in particular. That was the last date the court ruled. But there were a couple you wanted to highlight that we'd been following throughout the year in regards to, rights and cases that would be of interest, especially to the Catholic audience. What are some of the landmark cases that you want to comment on today?
Yeah, thanks so much for this opportunity, because there are like a trio of cases that I'm putting under the label of saving childhood. And the first, of course, came before last Friday, and that was U.S. versus Hermetti. It's a case that upheld Tennessee's ban on medical interventions on minors for the purpose of kind of transgender transformation. 4 states that have laws like this, basically saying that the Constitution doesn't get in the way of states safeguarding and regulating the medical industry, and especially in the opinions themselves, the justices noted the kind of developing and growing body of evidence that shows that these interventions on kids just are really disastrous, irreversible, end up sterilizing future.
Hey, Andrea, you're breaking up there.
Illness.
Hey, Andrea. Hey, it's Mike Romano.
Yeah.
Hey, you're
Mike.
breaking up. You're breaking up there. I may have to call you back in a second, okay?
Yeah. Why don't you call her back from your cell phone?
I'm going to call her back from my cell phone.
I'm going to make a little comment while we reconnect with Andrea. So, my only concern, which these are all great, that the court's saying, hey, you can't interfere. But, and maybe this is a question when Andrea gets back on the line, doesn't that leave space for some of the crazy states to go all in on this? Like the Washington states or the Californias or the New York states, and they're going to be like, hey, all you parents that want to have strange surgeries on with your, for your children, come to our state and we'll do it. So Andrea's back, right? So Andrea, this is a great win for carving out space in states that recognize this is harmful to kids. What does this do for the states that, we're freewheeling it and you bring your kid here and we'll do surgery on them at a young age? Won't that leave the space for that too?
You're absolutely right, Ellen. This is a big problem. States, progressive states that are claiming to be quote unquote safe havens for this. But I do think that there's a growing number of young people who are claiming that they didn't have the capacity to give informed consent, and they're suing doctors. And I think they rightly should sue these doctors for these kinds of experimental, untested interventions. It's a good reminder that sometimes the private legal system can also keep in check rogue experimental movements in the field of healthcare, things that don't actually bring health and bring more injury and woundedness.
Oh, okay. So we'll take a win there, and we'll work on the rest of them.
You're darn right we'll take a win. You're darn right we'll take a win.
What other cases are you looking at?
Yeah, again, the second case in the protection of childhood really deals with the protection of minors from accessing online pornography. Texas passed a law requiring a simple age verification, making sure that users had proof that they were 18 or older. And it was challenged by a group of the porn industry under the name of the Free Speech Coalition. And the Supreme Court said, hey, there is no First Amendment protection when it comes to safeguarding young children from the scourge of obscenity. And the only incidental burden on an adult from accessing these terrible images was really justified given the important state interest in safeguarding children from these images. So that was huge win. It's really clear that Justice Clarence Thomas, who authored the majority opinion, really laid out a very helpful guide moving forward. Technology has just advanced at lightning speed. We all know that. And states are trying to kind of get ahead or at least catch up with technology when it comes to vulnerable children. And so this was a huge win for Texas and for other states that are putting together these kinds of age verification laws. What's lovely is just after Texas put on the law, the largest pornography group, Pornhub, they stopped operating in Texas. So I think good riddance.
Oh, yeah.
They've stopped operating in a number of states.
Yeah, I think Utah, didn't they do that recently too? Stop operating there? Maybe it was one of them.
That seems right.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me about that particular case, and you alluded to the argument that was made to in the minority, was that this would perhaps inhibit the free speech rights of adults trying to access this by putting these restrictions, which I find highly ironic, given that that same side won't use that argument when it comes to things like the right to bear arms. They won't say, well, restrictions on arms to protect children might inhibit adults from exercising their right to bear arms. Like, it seems like there's not a consistency in that argumentation.
Well, and there's also kind of a general understood, if you go into a brick and mortar store and you want to get some sort of, obscene magazine, you have to show your ID. And if you want to get alcohol, you have to show your ID. If you want to buy a gun, you have to show an ID. And so doing this, virtually is no different. And there are safeguards in place and verification programs that will protect privacy, which was a concern. And I can see how, that could be a concern, that people could be blackmailed or something like that. I actually, wouldn't mind that being a dissuading people from looking at this stuff. But, these are legitimate objections that are better addressed instead of make kids more victims. Instead, work with verification programs to make sure for, the kind of the integrity of the programs that they're using so that privacy information isn't taken.
It seems to me, too, this might have a ripple effect on states that haven't passed these laws, because as these companies try to navigate servicing a state like Texas, which is huge, they're going to probably put in procedures that all states have to use, kind of knowing maybe this is going to come down the line, too. So we might as well just address it right now since this has been ruled in the favor of the state of Texas. So maybe there's one small lining. The other problem is kind of these on Pornhub's a big, obvious company to try to ban and set up procedures. It's the thousands of little private people doing their own porn on the internet. It's like a sieve, there's so many things going on there, and just a bunch of garbage gets through, right, Andrea?
Well, I think all garbage, pornography is just complete garbage. Yeah. But, this is the cost of business. And one of the things that we do know is that, sadly, the online porn industry is a, multi-million-dollar business. And so the least you can do is safeguard children. I mean, even people that think that this may be okay for adults, the research is out there that it's just really radically harmful for children. It also is a gateway for kids starting to question their own sexual identity, because they see things that really aren't beautiful about relationships between loving adults. Instead, they see abuse, injury, and treating another, or even treating yourself as an object and not a subject of love. So, any state that doesn't have age verification laws in place, get out there. And if you're in one of those states, start talking to your lawmakers. This is the time that we got to safeguard our children.
Good. And the other third landmark case, maybe the one that got a bit more publicity, was the one out of Montgomery County, Maryland, right? With the parents' opt-out rights.
Yeah, no, I think we've spoken about this before, and I was so excited about it. This is Mahmoud versus Taylor. It's a group of parents of different faith traditions challenging the inclusion of Pride storybooks, a collection of books pushing gender ideology and confusion on kids as young as pre-K. The parents just said, hey, look, all we want to do is know when the books are going to be read so that we can keep our kids home or have them in the library. You can do that for health classes. Why not for these books? And the school board refused over and over again. The Supreme Court said, hey, that's interfering with the free exercise rights of these religious parents. And so it violates the First Amendment. It's really important that parents of faith start paying attention, if you're in the public schools, to what's being there, and flex your muscles. You don't have to subject your kids to things that you think are at odds with what you believe. And so I think all school boards, especially Montgomery County, which is the most stubborn of all school boards are on notice that parents are the primary educators of their children, and their interests and their rights need to be respected.
Andrea, as a teacher myself in a high school, and my wife is a middle school teacher, both in Catholic schools, so fortunately we've not had this issue, thank God. But one thing that occurs to me that might not occur to most folks is that this may lead to some of these schools removing these books altogether, because the logistics of, we have X number of kids opting out, we've got to keep track of our list of kids who can't hear this, so we got to have another teacher available to take them to the library. That's just such a pain in the neck to deal with that most teachers in schools would say, well, forget it. Let's just not use these books because we want all the kids to be together. It's easier to manage. So there might be a practical effect here of reducing the use of these books for all.
Well, and I think that was one of the arguments that Montgomery County was trying to say of why they didn't want to give the opt-out right. I think it's kind of ironic, right, that there are enough people that say we don't want this, that you really should listen. And whether they do it because of administrative challenges or they do it because of the pushback and people running for school board and getting on the board and saying this isn't what we want, instead we want books that actually teach about reading. What was very interesting in this case is I think it was maybe 25, 50 principals in the county school system wrote and said these books just aren't age appropriate at all. Not even getting to the issue of the subject matter themselves and questions on whether it's true. They just said it's not appropriate to ask 5-year-olds to look for a drag queen in a book, in a board book. This isn't what we should do at schools. So I think that you're right that there is going to be a righting of the ship here. What is interesting is the value of the courts and the value of religious freedom and helping to move that along, because sometimes the democratic process takes a while, and in some areas of the country there's an overwhelming number of people in power that think that these are just dandy books to have in our public schools.
And they kind of look down on parents pushing back, and even principals in the case that you pointed out. Some principals don't want this nonsense in their school. And it seems to come from, people outside sometimes of the classroom that have their own ideas on what should be taught to your children or in the public schools. And I think the court made a point, and I forget who wrote it, saying, parents are crying out for people for schools to get back to doing what they're supposed to do, which is, mathematics, reading, literature, sciences, all of those things. And it seems that school boards spend an awful lot of time on this fluff nonsense that the parents are not really crying out for.
Yeah, no, that was Justice Clarence Thomas. God bless him. His concurring opinion really talked about kind of the rot in some of these progressive ideas on education. The other person, again, was the majority author of the court's opinion, which was Samuel Alito, and he wrote in response to the school board's argument that, these parents can just keep their kids at home, homeschool them, or send them to private school. He said, look, many parents can't afford that option. And they shouldn't be having to choose between what the public benefit offers to all children and something that's just infeasible. That's just a Hobson's choice that's unfair to them. Instead, there should be respect for their rights. And I thought that was really powerful because Maryland, unfortunately, doesn't have school choice. And we really, until we get real school choice across the country, we really shouldn't allow our public schools to just kind of steamroll over parents and what they'd like for their children, especially when it comes to things as intimate as human sexuality.
So, Andrea, to tie all three of these together, these three cases, am I right in thinking that were these all 6-3 decisions?
They were. And you know what? That's a little instructive, right? Because you've got three justices on the court that have dissented. Some of their dissents really weren't that powerful. And I think really what matters in the end is precedent, regardless of whether it's 5-4, 6-3, or 9-0. It's precedent. And so moving forward, this is a powerful trio of cases that really look at both the First Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, and what it really means and how it's supporting what the founders meant, and really putting, especially when it comes to gender ideology, a check on its attack against children.
I feel, Andrea, you deserve the summer off because you've been following these cases all year for us. And take a little break, and then I'm sure in the fall you're going to have equally important cases in front of the court again. Andrea Picotti-Bayer, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Great. Oh, man, it's like a school year for her. Finished with the court cases.
That's right.
We've got Anthony
Desclefano.
Thank you. The Miracle Book. See, I just have to think things, Tom, and they come out of my mouth like that.
Yeah.
Stay with us.
Enjoy fun in the sun with Ike's Beach Service. With locations in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, Fort Morgan, and Perdido Key, Ike's Beach Service offers beach chair and umbrella rentals, parasailing adventures, paddleboard and kayak rentals, and more. If you're interested in one of our beach equipment rentals or parasailing adventures, call 251-948-3757. That's 251-948-3757. Ike's Beach Service. Fun in the sun.
Here's your community calendar for the week of June 30th. Pickleball is back at St. Lawrence and Fairhope. Open courts on Mondays at 9 a.m. to noon. Bring your racket. Join them for faith, pickleball, and fun. For questions, call Lisa at 404-307. Call Lisa at 404-307-1355. Catholic Engagement Encounter is a weekend for couples preparing for the sacrament of marriage in the Archdiocese of Mobile. Fall retreats in September, October, and November at Visitation Monastery in Mobile. Cost $200 per couple. To register, visit mobile.engagedencounter.com. Cathedral Parish Young Adults Pews and Brews, Wednesday, July 9th. Join them for Mass at the Cathedral at 6 p.m., then gather at Greer's at 260 St. Louis Street for drinks and fellowship. Check out our community calendar on our website and send us your events 2 weeks in advance to office@archangelradio.com. I'm Shannon Garner. Have a blessed day.
Quit trying to hide from the joys and the sorrows of your life and enter into them deeply. Accept them, embrace them.
Find out more about how to embrace the crosses in your life by listening to Archangel Radio.
That's pretty much what Catholic radio does. It just presents the truth boldly, clearly, in such a way that Catholics can understand it and helps them to deepen their faith first and foremost, but then helps them to also learn how to share it. And non-Catholics can, in a non-threatening way, listen in to Catholic radio and learn about the Catholic faith. So it's awesome.
Archangel Radio. Awesome since 2010.
All of these things, I think, are examples of how we can rethink about what a saint is, and how they have the same difficulties that we do, the same personality differences, and those are not impediments to becoming saints.
Archangel Radio, the original Saint Factory.
Father Chris Booton.
People keep asking me, Father, what is this violent hands you're talking about, these aggressive hands you're always preaching about? Well, in the Catholic tradition, there's nothing that gives you better hands than having the rosary in them. And this is what we're about. Battles are won before they're fought by very often overwhelming the enemy with superior firepower. Catholicism is no different. We do have superior firepower because the Blessed Virgin Mary is the one that leads us into battle, and the rosary is the weapon of our times, St. Padre Pio said. And so having the rosary in our hands, praying it often, we overcome the enemy, we overcome the assaults of the devil, we win the battles with superior firepower. That's what Catholicism's about. That's how we get up and win every day. God bless you. Keep praying the rosary. Put in the work.
A nugget of wisdom from Father Paul Zogby, pastor of St. Margaret of Scotland in Foley.
There was a lady I met a couple of years after I went to seminary. She said, I just love our Pope. She was referencing John Paul II. And I said, wonderful, yeah, he's great. I love him too. She just started talking about how good he is for the church and the world. And so I asked her, I said, what parish do you go to? She said, no, I'm Methodist. But I love this Pope because he doesn't tell the world what the world wants to hear. He tells the world what the world needs to hear. And so that's the church's mission. And I think that I need to teach our young people in our parish that, if you're a Catholic doctor or a Catholic nurse or a Catholic lawyer, you have to be Catholic Monday through Saturday to celebrate that on Sunday. There's an expression, Mr. Business went to church, never missed a Sunday. But when he died, he went to hell for what he did on Monday.
Be Catholic every day with us, right here on Archangel Radio, broadcasting all that is good, true, and beautiful.
Mike Romano bringing us back a little Mike and the Mechanics there. Pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
We are joined on the line by author Anthony Desclefano, who is here to talk to us about his book called, quite simply and straightforwardly, The Miracle Book. And that certainly grabbed my attention. Good morning, Anthony. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So as I was looking through your book, the thing that the first thing I noticed was the copious number of endorsements that you received in the book. That was very impressive. You have a wide range of people who are supporting your work, and that really made me sit up and take notice.
Well, I don't always seek endorsements for my book, but this one, because it's on miracles, I felt it was important that I go out and tell people, I don't use any gimmicks in this book. I don't provide any magic formulas that guarantee specific miracles, but I do offer solid, biblically based, theologically sound principles that I believe can dramatically increase a person's chances of obtaining a miracle. And in order to show that I was legit, I went out and I made sure I got an imprimatur for the book, and I got some cardinals and bishops and priests and good solid people, even good Protestant folk, to endorse the book.
And really, and that is great, because the topic of miracles can be so easily misunderstood. And if you ask 10 people to define a miracle, you would probably get 10 different answers. So what is it that drew you to this topic of miracles? What compelled you to try to put this into words?
Well, first of all, I think that there's a lot of people who are suffering badly. Maybe some of your listeners right now are suffering, and they don't know how to go about asking God for help other than by begging him. They beg, they plead, they negotiate, they promise they'll do absolutely anything if only God will help them with this one request. And then if God doesn't answer their prayer in a way that they want, unfortunately, they sometimes, lose some faith or get angry with God, or they sink into despair. I figured there had to be a better way there had to be a method of praying for a miracle that at least, guarantees the best possible chances of God saying yes to us, or gives us an answer that satisfies our soul. And so I read every single book on miracles out there. I did many years of research, and this book, describes what exactly I found. And you're absolutely right. There are people who think miracles happen every day, and those that think that getting a miracle is like winning a lottery. And the answer is, it depends on what definition of miracle you're using. The strict definition of a miracle, like the parting of the Red Sea, a supernatural intervention by God in the natural order, yes, those miracles are very rare. But if you're talking about miracles in a general way, defined as an extraordinary answer to prayer that goes against the laws of statistics, but unfolds through natural means, like, for instance, someone needs a lot of money or they're about to lose their house, and they pray and suddenly they get an inheritance or some other kind of gift, those kinds of crazy, quote-unquote, coincidences do happen all the time. They're from God. They're part of His divine plan, and they're an answer to prayer. So miracles are both rare and they're frequent, and it depends on the definition you're using. And in this book, I discuss both types.
So you talk about the need for miracle seekers to embrace the paradoxes when they're praying. What did you mean by that?
Paradoxes are truths that seem to contradict themselves on the surface, but they actually reveal a deeper kind of truth. We all know about paradoxes. Less is more. The only constant is change. The closer you look, the less you see. Christianity is filled with paradoxes. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. God is one, but God is three. These aren't just poetic ideas. They reflect the reality that God is infinite, and we're just finite creatures. We can only understand bits of God's infinite truth a little bit at a time, and sometimes these little bits of truth, they contradict each other. But in reality, we just can't see the whole picture yet. Now, how does this tie into miracles? Well, in the Gospels, Jesus made some powerful promises. He said things like, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. If you have faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Those are bold, clear promises. And yet, sometimes when we pray for a miracle, even the most faith-filled people among us, they don't get what they ask for. The question is why? In this book, I suggest that the reason is that Christ's promises, while 100% accurate, aren't so straightforward as they seem. They're really paradoxes. They involve embracing pairs of truths that seem to contradict each other. And in my book, I talk about the 7 miracle paradoxes that seem like they contradict each other, but really we have to embrace both of these sets of promises at the same time.
We're talking with author Anthony Desclefano and his book, The Miracle Book. Just to continue on this topic of paradoxes, when I was looking at your table of contents, the one that jumped out to me, the chapter that jumped out, was on surrendering to the will of God. Because for me, just personally, I have a real struggle in life with letting go of things and handing them to God. Like, I'll pray and ask God for help and even for a miracle, but until it's answered one way or the other, I will be up at night. I'll be thinking about it. My brain will be puzzling out how to solve this problem. But isn't that the paradox that on the one hand, we do need to work on solving our problems, but also surrender it to God? How do those two things work together?
It's hard, especially if you're a person who likes to be in control of things, and you're a mover and a shaker like you apparently are, But we are expected to act. You got to go to the doctor when you're sick. You got to call a lawyer when you're in legal trouble. You've got to use all your talents to solve your problems. You can't just sit back and do nothing, and expect God to do everything. God gave you all your talents and gifts for a reason. He wants you to participate in your own salvation. But at the same time, after you've done all you can do, you have to let go. You have to relinquish. You have to trust that whatever outcome you're working for and praying for is ultimately in God's hands. In other words, you have to say what Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane: not my will, but your will be done. So you have to be self-reliant and use all your gifts, but you have to do what St. Augustine said: pray as though everything depended on God. Work as though everything depended on you. That's the balance we're trying to achieve in the Christian life. And that's exactly the point of this book, that you have to do both things. Some people, because of their personalities like you, are more inclined to do stuff. There are other people in the world that are lazy, and they're content to sit back and just leave it all on God's shoulders. No. You have to be able to do both, and that's the sweet spot when it comes to obtaining miracles, and that's the balance we're trying to achieve in the Christian life.
Is there a sweet spot on how to pray for a miracle? Because sometimes when you're praying for something that seems miraculous in nature and you need it to come through, you're like, maybe I'm not praying hard enough or perfect enough. Maybe God doesn't know what I really need, and which is kind of silly because God knows everything about us. So is there anything that might be helpful for people that, really they are looking for a miracle in their life right now?
Well, I think that's a paradox, too, because there is a value in being specific in our prayers. Yes, God knows exactly what we need, but when you're precise and you're specific in your prayers, you're showing God, you're trusting Him with the intimate details of your life, just as you would a close friend. The whole point of a Christian, not just Protestants, is to have a personal relationship with the Lord. So we have to share those kinds of details. That's what relationship is about, sharing. And when we make special requests to God, we're acknowledging that God isn't just Lord of the church we belong to. He's the Lord of our families. He's the Lord of our finances. He's the Lord of our vacations and our bedrooms. But at the same time that we're being precise, and this is the hard part, we must simultaneously be radically open to God's will. And the reason is, we don't know what's always truly best for us, even when we're praying with great sincerity. In fact, many times, we don't even really know what we want. Our desires may seem real to us, but they're always so wrapped up in our emotions, and they're influenced by fear and desire and pride and pain and ambition. Openness to God's will shows that we trust Him because He can see the big picture. He can see the future because He's in the future, and He wants what's best for us, not just in the moment, but forever. So when you embrace that miracle paradox by being precise in your prayer, yet radically open to God's will, that's when you open up all the divine possibilities to you, and you give God the freedom to do the unexpected and the extraordinary.
Yeah, Anthony, I think a classic temptation that we have as Christians is to think that if I ask God for something, Him answering my prayer means I'm getting what I have predetermined that I need, versus whatever the answer is, if it's not what I thought was the best thing, realizing that's still God acting, that God has answered my prayer, but in the way that's best for me, not in the way that I thought was best for me. And part of that surrender is accepting that result and trusting that God is going to work this out for my good in the end.
That's right. And again, it's not just that He's giving us what's best for us. He's giving us what we really deeply want inside our souls. When I was young, I wanted to be a doctor. I prayed to be a doctor. All my boyhood, I didn't get to be a doctor. A couple of little things got in the way, like organic chemistry and integral calculus. And I was mad at God. I was frustrated. But guess what? He did answer my prayer, because years later I became a writer of Christian books. I've written 30 books for children and adults, and I realized that what I really wanted to be, what I was really praying to be, was a healer. That's what I wanted to be. But I misinterpreted. I came up with my own solution. I wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't really. I would have hated being a doctor with all that blood. God saw deeper into my soul, and He gave me what I really wanted.
It kind of reminds me, Anthony, sometimes when I've been praying for something that I think I need, and I get to the end and I'm like, God, I don't even know if I need this anymore. So just take those prayers and use them for somebody who really needs them right now. Because isn't that what prayer should serve, too, that we're drawing closer to God and maybe in a greater understanding of what His plan is for our life?
And the community of believers. You're building up the body of Christ with your intercessory prayer when you do that.
The book is The Miracle Book, A Simple Guide to Asking for the Impossible, Anthony Desclefano, and it's from Sophia Institute Press. Thanks, and you can get it at Amazon, other places books are sold. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was a miracle we made Thursday, Tom.
Amen.
And I didn't call you Todd more than once this week. We thank our sponsor, Ike's Beach Service, with locations from Gulf Shores to Perdido Key. Enjoy fun in the sun with Ike's Beach Services, including paddle boards, parasailing, and beach equipment rental. Visit ikesbeachservice.com. Mike, what is happening tomorrow and then Monday?
Yes, tomorrow we have our Best Of show, because we won't be here, of course, featuring Tom Riello and our interview with Father Rich Perkins on his ordination, journey to the priesthood. And conversion to the Catholic Church. And also on Monday, we've got, you and Todd will be taking a look at the news from a Catholic perspective. Randall Smith on his article, Letter and Spirit, and Joseph Pronishin on why the St. Michael prayer shouldn't incite controversy. So there you go.
Okay.
I revert back to being a listener next week.
Well, we look for your hot takes on the text line then. Thanks, Tom.
Sounds good.
God bless you, and don't forget to call your mama. She loves you.
Find the perfect gift for the contractors in your life. A Tool Expo gift card, geared up for residential, commercial, and industrial contractors' needs. Tool Expo Construction Supplies offers contractor pricing on all screws and nails, construction site delivery, blueprint takeoff, and tool repair. From Sure Step decking and Atlantis rail systems to hardware, fasteners, and accessories. Tool Expo stocks preferred brands like CMT, Milwaukee, Rollair, DuPont Tyvek, DeWalt, Makita, and Simpson Strong Tie. Tool Expo with locations in Robertsdale, Orange Beach, Pensacola, and Freeport.
Archangel Radio's football broadcasts are high traffic and high impact. Get your brand in front of McGill-Tulane, St. Michael, and their opposing fan bases. Let us help you reach your audience as you support the mission of Catholic Radio. For more info on football packages, call 251-928-2111 or email office@archangelradio.com.